So the title of this talk that we came up with was The Role of Democracy in Journalism. And if you came here looking for answers, let me tell you the bar is still open. Because I know what our role has been, and I know what our role should be, but it's really hard to say what it will be, because that's not going to be decided by us. That's going to be decided by the people who we're trying to reach, the people who we serve. And I teach journalism at Michigan State, and I've taught at Wayne State and at University of Michigan Dearborn. And I tell all my students on the first day, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about journalism in 5 minutes, and then we're going to charge you for 4 or 5 years, because we need to make the money to justify the degree. But it's that we ask questions, we get answers, we report it back in a clear and compelling way, and then we let people decide. And that's really simple, but what questions do you ask? How do you get them answered? How do you present it in a clear and compelling way? That's what takes 3 or 4 or 5 years in some cases, because it's not quite that simple. But letting people decide is the easy part. But that's also the part where we face our greatest challenges. And I want to start off by telling you a little story about a guy named Kwame Kilpatrick, who was the youngest elected mayor of Detroit, who I thought was going to be the greatest mayor in my lifetime. And I lived through a couple of great mayors in Coleman Young and Dennis Archer. And the only thing I didn't like about Kilpatrick is he was 2 years younger than me, which made me feel like, man, I guess it's already all over for me. He was just 31 years old. I was 33, and I thought, this guy's already mayor, and here I am still drudging away in City Hall at the Detroit Free Press. But I learned a lot about Kwame Kilpatrick because he taught me something that we should always remember. Whatever we think about somebody, however much we like him or don't like him, it's the facts that tell the story. It's the story that we find that we report. And one of my favorite stories about Kwame Kilpatrick was one of the first ones I did, where I did what I think most journalists do when they cover government, is somebody makes a promise or they make a pledge or they tell you what they're going to do, and you mark it on your calendar. In this case, he said he was going to knock down more houses than any mayor in Detroit history, and he was going to do it faster than anybody. It was a pretty outlandish pledge. It was a very ambitious plan, but this was a big man. This was an energetic man. This was a talented man. This was a man who had the support of the entire community behind him. So if anybody could do it, it should be Kwame Kilpatrick. So I marked my calendar. 6 months came by. Asked how many houses he'd knocked down. I kind of gave him a little grace period. Took a couple weeks, maybe a month. Asked him how many houses got knocked down, and they didn't want to say. So we kept digging. We found out how many. And then instead of telling us why they missed their deadline, they told us that actually it's not that we didn't knock down as many houses as we said we would. It's that the last mayor didn't knock down as many houses as he said he would. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You didn't hit your goal, but you're telling me the story is the last guy was a liar? I said, well, let me entertain that crazy notion for a minute. Show me the houses that the last mayor said he knocked down that are still standing, and I'll do that story. Well, they could never do that. And so we reported this story that said Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick missed his deadline, failed to live up to his ambitious plan. And it was a fair story, but it taught me one of these lessons that we're learning a lot now, that there's a strategy out there called sand in the face. And that's where when you ask a question, just like in a dirty street fight, somebody throws sand in your face you can't see, and then they change the whole game. What was so telling to me about this was when people miss their deadlines, that's not a hanging offense. If they have a good excuse, if there's a reason, the funding ran out, the weather was bad, it turns out it was more complicated than we thought, that's fine and that's fair, and then we report that. That's not really a gotcha. That's just telling people what we found. It's explaining why something they were led to believe would happen didn't happen. But when they try and prevaricate, when they try and give you a phony excuse, when they lie to you, then that's a big story. And that really shows you what they're all about. So I won't bore you with the Kwame Kilpatrick saga. It's the rise, the fall, powerful people, beautiful people, rich people, horny people, corrupt people. It'd make a great book. Everybody agrees except for the publishers in New York, but maybe someday we'll straighten them out. But what happened is when he fell hard and eventually ended up on trial. And I was in the courthouse with his lawyers, and the way TV works, and at that time I was working for a TV station, is you need to have sound. And in the U.S., you can't have cameras in a federal courthouse. So every day we had to cover this historic trial, and we had to tell people what happened in a courtroom, not the most exciting place in the world, but when you have no video and you have no sound, it's almost an impossible story to tell. So every day we would get the lawyers outside the courthouse and ask them what happened that day, and they'd say, well, you were there, you knew. We said, I know, but you need to tell our viewers. You need to tell the people who couldn't be there. And I'd like them to hear it in your words because you're the one who spoke. And sometimes they'd speak and sometimes they wouldn't. And the feds would never talk because prosecutors have some rules about what they can and they can't say. And one day, one of the lawyers, one of the defense attorneys came up to me and said, you know, this case is so hard because of you guys. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, because you guys are out to get him. You know, you're pushing this narrative. You're telling this story every day. And I said, you know what, counselor? I got to stop you right there. Because everybody in this courtroom is pushing a story. We're the only ones who aren't. We're the only ones who want to get both sides. We're the only ones who want to tell people what happened, and we don't want to shade it. We don't want to explain it. We don't want to make it seem worse or better than it was. You know, people think the prosecutors are the good guys. Okay, well, they want to win too, and sometimes they cut corners. The defense attorneys, sometimes people want to say they're the noble guys. Well, they have a client that they're trying to get off the hook. But we as the journalists are the only ones in there who people can trust to tell them what happened, what the truth was. And this was an alien concept to this attorney, and it's something that I think we're losing track of as people forget what our role is. And the jobs we do become even harder because before Kwame Kilpatrick had his fall, we told all the stories that we found about him. You know, that he was using the city credit card to pay for a hotel room at the Luxor Casino in Las Vegas while his family was out there on a trip that was funded by taxpayers, that he was using the city's petty cash fund to buy hats for himself and fine meals and things like that, that he and his chief of staff, who was also his lover, were using nonprofit funds to take trips to Aspen and to buy golf clubs and to have everybody who worked for him in the mayor's office put up a collection so they could get him a watch with a fancy band on it that said the mayor on it. We reported all these stories, and it had some impact, but somewhere along the line, a state senator who didn't like the mayor came up to me and said, you got to stop doing these stories. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you got to stop doing these stories because people are starting to feel sorry for him. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, it seems like you're picking on him. And I said, well, here's what we do is we ask questions, we get answers, we report it in a clear and compelling way, and we let people decide. And I said, as long as he's doing things that are wrong or illegal or improper that people deserve to know, we're going to tell those stories. And whether it helps him or hurts him isn't our problem. It's not really up to us. That's not our job. Our job is pretty simple. And sure enough, Kwame Kilpatrick was up for re-election and won in a very close race. And he partly won by saying the media's out to get me, and look at all these stories they're doing. They're picking on me. They're trying to make an example of me. They're singling me out. And I thought about that at the time that this state senator told me that. And it's always interesting when these guys complain to you, because I later on busted this state senator for living outside his district, and I caught him gardening, and he was all upset then. I guess we weren't pals then, but it's like, you know, this is what we do. We tell the stories that we find. And he wasn't that upset because he asked if he could go in and change clothes 3 times before he explained to us why he didn't live where he was supposed to live, but that's a whole other story. But this Kilpatrick conundrum of telling the truth so often and doing our job so well that it actually becomes a defense mechanism for the person who's doing wrong. And I can tell you, if he was here, you'd love him. It'd be a much better speech, and everybody would want to take a picture with him and shake his hand. But he was a bad guy, and that's not my opinion. That's what a jury found when they convicted him of 28 counts of public corruption. But I think of that story as I think about our role, which again is just simple. You know, we stick to the formula. We ask questions, we get answers, we tell it in a compelling way, and we let people decide. And then around 2016, a guy named Donald Trump got elected president. And I don't care what you think about Donald Trump, whether you like him or not like him. I think it's not open for debate that he's not the most truthful individual we've ever had in the White House, and that's saying quite a lot. And the Washington Post decided they were going to start tracking his lies. And they thought what we should do, our responsibility as a journalism organization, as the newspaper in this company town where the business is politics, is we should let people know, is the president being truthful? Because we've been told for years that we want people of character in the White House. If you think back, Bill Clinton said, I tried marijuana, but I didn't inhale, I didn't like it. And that almost cost him the presidency. Then we fast forward, and the guy, the highway we drove up on, said, yeah, you know, I did cocaine and did all kinds of crazy stuff. And people were like, that's cool, we'll send you back in there twice. Nobody thought twice about it. So the bar is kind of lowering for presidents. But truth is still something people care about. They hate to be lied to. And our business is to be the truth tellers and to put the truth to the lie. And so the Washington Post had this tracker where they're counting it up. And it's like, Trump has told dozens of lies. Now he's told hundreds of lies. Now he's told thousands of lies. Now he's told, I think it got to be like 10,000 lies, which seems incredible. I mean, I didn't know he said 10,000 things. And instead of people saying, you know what, we need better, we deserve better, it became the media's picking on me. They're out to get me. Never that they were wrong, never that I actually told the truth, but that the media's out to get me. And he pivoted from being someone who told a lot of lies to being someone who was a victim, and that we were the bad guys. By pointing out the lies, we became the people who were a threat to democracy. Remember, we're the enemy of the people. This is all fake news, all that kind of stuff. But we were just doing our jobs. And somehow he pivoted to make this wrong, to make this bad. So we go through COVID, and then we have a change in presidency, and Trump is being tried for various crimes, and it gets turned around. They're out to persecute me. They're out to get me. Whether he should have been charged or not is an open question. I think people of reasonable minds can disagree on that. That he was convicted, I mean, we have to trust our judicial system. But what it turned on was not that he had done anything right or wrong, it's that we had done something wrong. That we are not the truth tellers anymore, that we're somehow picking winners and losers. And that you can do whatever you want as long as you, and it's the oldest game in the book, to shoot the messenger, that you can blame us for the news that you wish you weren't reading. The news that we have no choice to report because it's the truth, and that's what we do, is we report the truth. So instead of outrage, people got numb. And then people started to attack us, and people started to blame us. And then Trump runs for president again, and he's elected to perhaps a third term. I don't know how you do your counting, but he would say he was elected to a third term. And a funny thing happened at the Washington Post. They don't do the truth tracker anymore. If they count the lies, they don't put it on their homepage, because I read their website about 5 or 6 times a day because I can't believe everything that's coming out of Washington. And they do occasionally score things by Pinocchios, but they don't do as much as they used to. And this is why I don't really know what to tell you about our role in democracy, because what they were doing is what we're supposed to do, is tell the truth. And they got pressure and they got heat. And people started seeing us as the bad guy, and so now they don't do it anymore. So did somebody stop lying, or did we stop counting? And I don't know what the right answer is. I think about this all the time, is should they have stopped doing what they did? Clearly, it did not have the intended effect, which is not to bring down the president, but to inform people that somebody wasn't being truthful. Again, we're in the truth we're supposed to produce. And we do some crossword puzzles, and I guess there's the jumble, and I don't know, does anybody do Wordle? It's not really my thing, but we have a little bit of those bells and whistles to entertain people, and the odd recipe here and there, and I think we're still running peanuts, even though Charles Schultz has been dead for 30 years. But really the reason why we're here is we tell the truth. And there are newspapers that, are called the Intelligencer, the news. I mean, it couldn't be any simpler than that. The free press, that's what we do, is we tell the truth. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why are we still doing this? What should we do? Should we stop it? I mean, I've personally witnessed someone who generated sympathy by saying that his misdeeds weren't the problem. The problem was people telling you about his misdeeds. And now we've all, on a national level, seen someone who's been very successful by making the media the bad guy, by doing what you're trained to do here, and what we were trained to do, and what we want you to do when you go out of here. And I sit there and I think about it, and I'm like, well, this is a bad deal. We do a good job. We do an important job. We do what we're supposed to do, and somehow it blows up on our face. And I think, should we keep doing it? And I think of a couple things that I learned in my English literature classes is the fool. I feel like the fool when we do these things. And if you have studied Shakespeare, and if you have studied Shakespeare and I'm wrong, don't say anything. But the fool is always the one who actually knows what's going on. The fool is the one who knows who did the bad thing. And they jump around and they act like an idiot because they realize, if people realize that they're that sharp and they're that observant, they really know what's going on, that people won't trust them anymore, they won't give them access, and they may actually be harmed. So should we be the fool? Should we be the one who knows what's really going on? Who knows where the bodies are buried? Who knows who did what to whom? But we kind of keep it to ourselves for our own safety and security? And then I think about a great book that's an allegory for Germany's sort of willful ignorance of what was happening in the run-up to World War II. And there's a different fool in this story. And it's a book called The Tin Drum. And it's also been made into a great movie. You should watch it sometime. Do not have children in the room when you watch it. But there's a scene where the insurgents so as you know, Germany invaded Poland and overran Poland. And there were sympathizers and collaborators. And in the Tin Drum, the workers in the Polish post office were the insurgents. They were the ones who continued to spread the word about what was really going on, what the war was really about, and trying to keep people informed and trying to preserve Poland's independence and their freedom. And some of the local brown shirts got together, and they lined up all the people from the Polish post office against a wall, and they shot them. And then they plastered over the wall, and they took the bodies, and they hid the bodies. And they pretended like nothing happened. These people just disappeared. The people who were trying to keep their country strong, who were trying to tell the truth, who were trying to inform people, who were trying to be that voice of reason and wisdom, were suddenly just gone. And so in this town, there was kind of a village idiot, a crazy guy that nobody took seriously. I think he even dressed like a clown, but he was the fool. And he takes all the children in the village. And if you're here from Ion, Michigan, this is not about you. You're not little children. You're very large children with tremendous appetites. And he sends the kids out into this field. And because he has so many people, they're scouring. They're on their hands and their knees. And they're small, so they can root around in all the grass and all the roots and all the weeds. And one of them comes up to the fool, and he runs up to him with a shell casing. And the fool takes and he says, aha. He says, they always miss one. And of course, these are little kids. They don't understand it. They don't know what it is. But what he meant was that when the truth tellers and the people who are there for the right reason are somehow eliminated, and people try and pretend that it didn't happen, they always leave something behind. there's always a piece of evidence. There's always that shell casing that lets you know what really happened. And I think as investigative reporters, every time we go after a story, we have to realize that that shell casing is there somewhere. That no matter how hard it is to find what it was we're looking at, no matter how well they've plastered the wall, no matter how well they've hidden the bodies, that if enough of us get out there and we get on our hands and our knees and we crawl around and we root through the dirt and the rocks and the bracken, we can find that thing we're looking for, the evidence, the proof, the truth that we think is so important to share to people. And I think about that, and I think, do we pull back now? Do we stop telling the truth? Do we lay low for a while until people come around? It might be better for us if we did. We might be more popular because nobody likes the people who bring bad news, although I always think it's good news when you tell people things they need to know, things they deserve to know. Or do we raise the bar? Is it that we don't report on your first 100 lies? We only report on the next 900? And when you get to 1,000, we give you a badge or something? That's tempting. I mean, we've already seen that. I didn't smoke weed, bad news. I did cocaine, who cares? So we have kind of raised the bar on things. But I'm going to suggest that that's a mistake because the way we get stories is by doing stories. Because people who know the truth, they want to find the truth tellers. There are so few of us now compared to what we used to have 20 or 30 years ago that we really need to deputize the people in our communities. We need them to know that we're out there trying to tell the truth. But we can't be everywhere. And I don't think we want to tell them that there are little children, but we need them out there rooting around trying to find the truth and bringing it back to us so that we can tell everybody else. And so I would say that I don't think we need to raise the bar, and I don't think we need to stop telling the truth, and I don't think we need to stop counting the lies, even if it may end up being something that makes our jobs more difficult and may, in the end, abet the liars, may help the people who are trying to get away with something get away with it. Because this is what we do. This is why we're here. This is the important thing. And when I think about that, I kind of wonder, I'm from Detroit, and before the Fisher body people, if you have an old car, you had a little sticker on the rocker panel with a carriage that said Fisher, made by Fisher body. Well, it's because the Fisher brothers used to be carriage makers, and they made some of the finest wooden carriages around. Then this guy named Henry Ford came along and, kind of put them out of business. Well, they adapted. Most people didn't. And I worry, am I telling you that by continuing to count the lies and tell the truth when we find it, are we the carriage makers who didn't adapt? Are we so good at doing this thing we don't ever want to stop doing it, even to the point where nobody wants it anymore? And I'm afraid that maybe that's what I am suggesting, is that we should continue to do this even though it may be our own undoing, unless we can sell more Wordles and there's some peanuts that people hadn't seen yet, and that maybe there's a crossword puzzle people can't get anywhere else. But I tell you this, not knowing whether it's the right thing to do, but also knowing that this is what we do. And if we don't keep doing it, do we deserve to survive because we occasionally give people a crossword puzzle and a horoscope and maybe a 30-year-old comic by a dead guy from Santa Rosa, California, who I'm told was a hell of a hockey player? I mean, I don't think so. I think that our role in democracy is one that's important, and that if people don't value it right now, we have to keep doing it until they either come around or whether we find something else to do. Because if your business is the truth and you try and go into another business, I think that's just another way for you to go out of business. And I wish I could tell you that there was an easy way, but nothing about this job is easy. Some of you are going to be graduating soon, and you're going to be looking for jobs. And I had a great resume when I graduated, if I do say so myself. I sent out 130 resumes, and I didn't get a job. I got a tryout, and it was horrible, but I kept looking. In this business, this is a business of rejection. People are going to tell you no. When they finally hire, they're not going to give you the job you want. When you get the job you wanted, they won't give you the assignment you wanted. When you get the assignment you wanted, they won't let you do the story you wanted. When you do the story you want, they won't put it on the front page. When they put it on the front page, they won't put the right headline on it. But you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it. And that's why we are so unique, is we don't take no for an answer, and when other people give up, we don't give up. So do we stop telling the truth? I don't think so. Is our role in democracy to lower the bar, raise the bar, change what we do, make it easier for the bad guys, make it easier for the liars to pretend that they're not liars? I don't think so. Do we play the fool? Maybe a little bit, if you're comfortable doing that. But I think we have to do what we do, is we just tell the truth, we ask questions, we get answers, we report in a clear and compelling way, and we let people decide. And if they decide they don't like that, our role in democracy is one that is no longer valued. But I think what happens next is democracy isn't valued anymore. And if I'm going to go down swinging with anybody, I'm going to go down swinging with democracy. So I would encourage you to not quit, to not give up, to not take no for an answer, to tell the truth to the lies, to put up with the bullshit, to let people call you names, to let people be mad at you, because in the end, they're not really mad at you. They're mad at what's happening. And when they come to their senses, they'll appreciate that you're not the fool. You're the one person who knew what was going on. And by the way, Cordelia's in the yard next door. But that's another story. No English majors? Okay, cool. So please don't give up. And thanks for coming here. What you aim to do is very admirable. It's a great job. You get to see amazing things. You get to meet incredible people, most of whom will be your colleagues. And you get to tell the kind of stories that people deserve to hear, and sometimes they might not want to hear, but they need to hear. So your role in democracy, our role in democracy, I would say is the most important one. And please, when you're feeling like everybody's out to get you, don't forget it. You're not the fool. They are. So thanks. And if you have any questions, or if you have a better idea to how we survive, the bar's still open. We'll be happy to take those suggestions. And you're